Homelander is a gaping abyss of deep need and sociopathy. I wouldn't invite you into my home if you were like him.
When Gen V debuted, it did something rare in television. It expanded a beloved, chaotic, and violent universe, The Boys, without feeling like a cheap spin-off. It carved out its own identity, its own rhythm, and its own emotional heartbeat. By season 2, it had perfected that balance, walking the fine line between superhero satire and psychological drama with surgical precision. But perfection is always elusive. Gen V Season 2 was a near-flawless blend of action, trauma, and morality. Every character had depth, every theme had weight, and every episode deepened the question that defines the entire Boys universe: what does power do to people? Still, amid all that brilliance, there was one creative misstep, one moment where Gen V stumbled ever so slightly under the weight of its parent show's legacy. The only mistake Gen V Season 2 made was leaning too hard on Homelander's shadow, letting the myth of The Boys overshadow the voice of Gen V. Let's break down why everything else worked so beautifully, and how that single decision slightly cracked the show's near-perfect armor. The genius of Gen V's foundation. Before we zoom into the one mistake, we need to appreciate how solid the rest of the architecture was. From its first frame, Gen V established itself as more than The Boys but with teens. It didn't copy the formula, it translated it. Where The Boys used corporate media and politics to dissect American fascism, Gen V focused on education, trauma, and identity. The setting, Godalkin University, was a stroke of genius. It wasn't just a parody of superhero academies, it was a metaphor for how institutions shape young people into products. Vought doesn't raise heroes, it manufactures them. Season 2 doubled down on this by showing the fallout of Season 1's ending: Marie, Jordan, Kate, and Andre struggling to redefine what heroism means after the Godalkin cover-up. It wasn't just about saving the world, it was about saving themselves from the systems that made them. Each of them became an emotional core of the story. Marie Morrow, a walking contradiction, a hero born from tragedy, punished for her power. Jordan Lee, the embodiment of duality, fighting to define identity beyond gender and expectation. Andre Anderson, haunted by his father's legacy, caught between compassion and ambition. Kate Dunlap, the most human of them all, whose powers are as manipulative as the guilt she carries. Through them, Gen V explored themes that The Boys rarely slowed down to examine: shame, belonging, and the cost of trying to be good in a world built to reward monsters. Season 2's strength: identity over spectacle. By Season 2, Gen V had hit its stride. The tone was tighter, the dialogue sharper. The show no longer felt like it needed to prove itself to The Boys' audience, it earned its own. What made Season 2 sing was how it handled its tone. The writing embraced moments of silence, therapy sessions, vulnerability, and friendship amidst the chaos. Unlike The Boys, where cynicism often wins, Gen V allowed flickers of hope. We saw Marie trying to control her narrative in a world that called her a murderer. We saw Jordan realizing that visibility isn't the same as freedom. We saw Andre learning that power inherited can also be power corrupted. This wasn't just a show about blood and guts. It was about becoming an adult in a corrupt world. And for 90% of the season, that's what made it feel revolutionary. Until the very end, when the story, perhaps out of fear or marketing strategy, bowed to the pressure of its own mythology. The one mistake, the Homelander problem. The ending of Gen V Season 2 should have belonged to Marie. After everything she'd survived, her family trauma, the manipulation by Kate, and the betrayal by Vought, the finale should have ended with her voice. Instead, the final moments reminded us whose universe we were, really. Homelander's sudden intervention, his brutal reassertion of dominance, shifted the narrative tone. What was a story about young people discovering agency became a stage for The Boys' poster villain. Now, don't get it twisted, Anthony Starr's performance as Homelander is always phenomenal. He commands the screen like a god of menace. But in Gen V, his presence wasn't needed. It didn't deepen the story, it derailed it. Here's why that was the one mistake. Homelander's cameo stole thematic ownership from the characters we'd invested in. Marie's entire journey had been about confronting power, institutional, emotional, and literal. The final act was poised to prove that she could face that power and not crumble. Instead, the show pivoted back to the boys' tone, nihilistic, patriarchal, familiar. The moment Homelander appeared, Gen V stopped being about the next generation of soups and became the prequel to The Boys Season 5, and that, right there, is the creative tension that haunts all spin-offs, the fear of independence. Why it feels like a mistake, and not just a cameo. Let's unpack this further. In storytelling, cameos can serve two purposes: to connect universes, to elevate stakes. Homelander's appearance achieved both, but at a price. It reminded audiences that The Boys still holds the narrative power, that these kids, no matter how complex or brave, still live in his world. That's fine for a marketing crossover, but it undercuts Gen V's emotional autonomy. Because Gen V was never about superheroes beating the system, it was about them realizing the system was designed to make them villains. It was about learning who they are beyond the script's Vought writes for them. When Homelander killed Marie's defiance with a single gesture, it symbolically erased that arc. Not narratively, she's still alive, her story isn't over, but emotionally. It told viewers, this is still Homelander's universe, and no one escapes his gravity. That's a bold statement, but not the one Gen V had been building toward. Season 2 deserved to end with ambiguity, yes, but not dependency. What the writers got perfectly right elsewhere. To understand how sharp that tonal drop felt, you need to see how good everything else was. The themes? Gen V handled trauma and identity with maturity far beyond most superhero shows. The writing didn't treat trauma as aesthetic, it showed recovery as messy, nonlinear, and often invisible. The world building. The Godalkin setting evolved in Season 2. The layers of manipulation were clearer. We learned more about Vought's psychological conditioning programs, turning students into marketable products. It's a biting commentary on the entertainment industry itself, wrapped in gore and glitter. The characters. Every protagonist had moral contradictions, the hallmark of the boys' universe. But in Gen V, those contradictions were driven by youth and confusion, not corruption. These weren't bad people. They were broken people trying not to become bad. The tone. Unlike The Boys, which thrives on satire and cynicism, Gen V dared to be earnest. That's what made it so powerful. It found beauty in the wreckage. Even the music and cinematography supported that duality. Neon lights clashing with horror, pop songs echoing after trauma, school corridors that felt like both sanctuary and prison. Everything was calibrated perfectly, until the finale leaned too far into its parent show's tone. The creative fear behind the mistake. Why would the writers, who crafted such a strong stand-alone voice, make that decision? Because in shared universes, creative teams face a paradox. Connection brings power, but also dependency. The Gen V creators likely felt pressure to tether their narrative back to the boys, ensuring that viewers see it as essential viewing for the upcoming season. Homelander's appearance guarantees cross-promotion, theories, and fan buzz. But thematically it undercuts Gen V's rebellion. The entire story was about young people escaping control, by parents, by corporations, by destiny. And yet, the finale quietly told us that they're still not free. From a business perspective, it's brilliant synergy. From a storytelling perspective, it's a self-inflicted wound. That's why this wasn't just a minor flaw. It's the only real mistake in an otherwise perfect season. What the mistake symbolizes. Homelander's intrusion works almost as meta-commentary, maybe unintentionally. He's not just dominating Marie in that final scene, he's dominating the narrative space. He represents the corporate control that both the show and its characters are trying to escape. It's poetic irony, the idea that even a show about rebellion can't fully rebel from the empire that created it. If you zoom out, Gen V becomes a mirror of Vought itself. A new creation, trying to stand on its own. Marketed as independent, but still defined by its parent brand. Brilliant, passionate, and slightly shackled. That's the genius and tragedy of Gen V's one mistake. It accidentally became the thing it was critiquing. How it could have been fixed. If the finale had simply referenced Homelander, Say, through news footage, or even in off-screen conversation, it would have kept his influence alive without stealing the moment. Imagine if the show ended on Marie staring at a camera, knowing the world was watching, her fear mixing with defiance. That would have kept the tension, preserved Gen V's tone, and left the door open for the boys' crossover without losing ownership. Sometimes, restraint is more powerful than revelation. Season 2 had earned that restraint. Why everything else still works. Despite that misstep, Gen V Season 2 remains one of the sharpest pieces of storytelling in the superhero genre. It didn't just continue The Boys' legacy, it evolved it. Where The Boys is about the death of morality in adulthood, Gen V is about the birth of morality in youth. Where The Boys mocks heroes, Gen V empathizes with them.